Hi,
How you doing?
I'm good. Hello.
Great to be with you guys.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, we should say what we're doing here
We should.
because this is The Grounding, which is the sister podcast to Founded and Grounded. Ollie, should we quickly tell the story as to what we're doing here, and then we will introduce the person that we have with us here as well today.
Let's do it, Becky.
So a little while ago, you and I decided that we love the interview style of Founded and Grounded, but we also wanted something a bit more timely. We have chats with each other and we talk about like what's going on, how it affects founders right now, kind of that actual real life in real time. And we went, why don't we just go live, have these chats? It'll be super simple. What could possibly go wrong?
Quite a few things. Yeah, I think from our point of view, I think we just wanted to have that real-time voice about what's going on in the business startup scene, locally, nationally, internationally, and not just do the founder stories, which are obviously evergreen, but do stuff that's more regular. So we're planning to do this bi-weekly out to LinkedIn, YouTube, and maybe some other channels in the future. And eventually the plan, Becky, is to invite a live audience as well. So
yes,
we're not going to run before we're walking. This is our third attempt of trying to make this work. The first two have, safe to say, failed quite miserably.
Yep, I think the content was beautiful. It's just nobody could hear it.
Yeah, the audio was bad. So yeah, attempt number 3, third time lucky.
I do know some people have watched those episodes. So if you have, then you are like the real ones. But
we should shout out Robin quickly, who did actually clear up the audio as much as he could and actually then reposted it on YouTube for us.
Yeah.
And I mean, we love people like Robin and fans that are going to be very dedicated to try and make our job easier.
We really do appreciate it. I mean, we're doing it for you, so we love it when you do things for us as well. So let's jump in, because the other part of what we wanted to do with these lives, and by doing something more timely, was to bring on people who wouldn't necessarily be guests of the interview style podcast, because they're all founders at a certain stage of business. We want to talk to other people who are part of this ecosystem, part of this environment. You mentioned local and national, but we're actually going regional today in the Southwest. So Matt, you've joined us. This is Matt Wilde from Swig.
Thank you, great to be here.
I'll let Matt say a bit more. And really, we're gonna, this is about having a conversation, inviting kind of you into our wider the types of conversations that we're having, and we're hoping to do this more in the future as well. So yeah, Matt, could you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Ollie and Becky. It's fantastic to be here. So my name's Matt. I'm Managing Director of Swig Finance. We're a social impact regional based lender. We're specifically something known as a CDFI, which is a community development finance institution. That's a complex way of saying not-for-profit social impact lender. We cover the entirety of the Southwest, where we're a solely debt-based organisation. Last year, we lent about 15 million quid.
Great.
Decent.
And what types of businesses are you working with?
We're entirely sector agnostic and almost stage of business agnostic. So we go everywhere from the startup who is actually starting up, they have nothing, all the way through to pretty established businesses.
Yeah. Like we said, you've got a regional twist.
Yeah.
So you're, because we have listeners from all over the world, so they may not know some of these places, but we're the southwest of England, right?
I should say,
so
yes.
I'm sure people have heard of Cornwall.
Cornwall, yeah, it's been on, St. Michael's Mount is quite famous. People have probably seen that on TV. So, yeah.
Scones,
or scones, depending on which way you say it.
Yeah.
Bath is obviously famous from Bridgerton, so yeah.
Yeah, and you cover all those places.
All of those places, all the way from sort of Gloucester down to the Isles of Scilly.
Helping those businesses to thrive. So one thing you mentioned then was that it's debt finance and kind of all different types of businesses. What kind of gap are you filling there, or what kind of problems are you seeing for businesses that then mean that you're able to step in and help those businesses out?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So a lot of the sort of the UK finance market, and I've seen a lot of it because I've worked for Lloyds Bank in secured debt finance. I've worked for Development Bank of Wales in unsecured cash flow lending and in tech equity investments. So I've seen sort of that range. A lot of it is set up to, get that VC capital in there into businesses that are pitching to be the next unicorn. Lots of businesses aren't going to be a unicorn, and that's absolutely fine. So the gap we see we're filling is, how do we get businesses up and going and thriving and surviving? And surviving is also okay.
Yeah. I'm interested to know, obviously, because there is that issue, particularly at the early stage of trying to get a business off the ground. I was speaking to a founder a couple of weeks ago, and they were doing a family and friends round. They'd raised 90. Turns out you can't do much with less than £100. But I'm kind of joking there. But I'm not, in a way that, unless you've got a really good network or access to people, there's not much you can do, particularly at the early stage, to get your business funded. There are obviously startup loans that exist, and I've done a fair bit of work in that area. So funded about 500 businesses through my consultancy, raised about 7 million through that particular scheme. But there's not many options, is there? Like, when you're at that early stage, like what else is there?
No, and you've seen sort of the national high street banks pull away from that sector, and that's where we see ourselves as a CDFIs coming in to fill that gap. So we offer the startup loan product, £500 to 25 grand per director. We've seen some really good case studies of businesses. We've had one recently who took a startup loan from us. They've then come back on for a follow-on round of a larger amount of debt for us. And then they've gone on to raise equity and then exit from from us as well, repay us and move on to the next stage. And that's like a fantastic story. Some might say, why don't you go fight in that space? No, I love it. I love seeing that we can support businesses from that small conceptual stage to the place where they no longer need us.
Yeah, I think the one thing for anybody maybe listening in, maybe considering a startup loan, is just to make it obviously clear in terms it is a personal loan that's being used for business purposes. So it does take into account things like your personal credit score and stuff like that. But I think when there's no other game in town, unless you've got family or friends that are going to invest, or you've got some angel investors, or traditional high street banks aren't going to lend at that stage of the business, then unless you've got your own investment, then there's not many other plays in town, really, is there?
There's grant funding and options like that. I think the key thing it says, startup loan, yes, is a personal debt, but actually, our business lending that we do, that follow-on round, that's lending to the business. So, you're no longer borrowing it yourself. And that's where we really want to sort of support businesses and, get them going and see them thriving and surviving.
You're going through that shift. I want to kind of zoom out a little bit. Like we said, these are real-time moments, but I do want to dig back into that conversation in this wider context. So as of right now, we were just talking before we started about how the fact that everything is uncertain these days. Everything is inconsistent. And I guess in terms of founders coming in, I don't know. Let's just name what's going on at the moment, which is there is a war currently going on, and that's changing the markets again. And it just feels like now every single month, whatever, we're having conversations. I think ever since COVID, right, there's been this instability, and that's the foundations we're building all of this on. And what are you finding in terms of confidence, I guess, and founders, especially again in that early stage where founders are maybe having to take that risk, and if they're getting those loans which are related to their personal finances, and what are you seeing?
I mean, it's really interesting. I sort of, there's that meme that goes around now, as as millennials, you live through a once in a generation event almost weekly, as you say, it feels almost monthly. So I think, for businesses and founders now, just expect the unexpected. It's very trite to say it, but do. So in terms of, what we're seeing more, I think people are coming with more considered proposals, probably maybe less speculative than you would have seen otherwise. And really making sure, maybe they, I don't know, they're a year into their startup journey and, they've got a couple of contracts and they're pushing for the next one. Really making sure they've got the working capital and the facilities to support that, rather than thinking, I'll stretch it, because things move really quickly. And we have these, we're a small business ourselves at Swig, we have these pressures and we're planning for that. How do we weather, the storms? Do interest rates go a certain way that impacts us? How does it impact our energy costs, our staffing costs?
Yeah, it's such a challenge. You mentioned you have some background working in tech equity as well, and I work with a lot of tech businesses. Are you finding that those kind of businesses are probably less likely to come through your portfolio here, or they might only come through when they're at a bit of a later stage?
Yeah, so I've spent sort of 2 years funding technology startups at Development Bank of Wales, primarily through debt or convertible loans, and I really enjoyed that. I would say that's probably not the sweet spot for Swig at the moment. That said, we've done a photonics business recently, so LEDs. I've probably got that right. I might not have quite got the science right there. We've done an LED business, so we do operate in that tech space. But again, our products we offer are more loan finance rather than necessarily equity finance, and that's an interesting dynamic in the UK market as well.
Yeah, and I think that's for founders. It's about finding the right people for your business, for where you are right now. I'm thinking about some of the tech businesses I work with where you think, it probably wouldn't, that they need to move further before they would be in a certain place.
But I think generally as well, like when there's volatility, there's opportunity. And that's exactly what entrepreneurs are, aren't they? They're people who see a problem, find an opportunity, come up with a solution. And so I think, although we are living in very uncertain times, I do think is going to create more opportunities for founders out there if you're looking.
Well, and what I think is, if everything's going to be uncertain anyway, then
for a bit more
why not have some fun and it's fun. Maybe it's the wrong word,
but it's like, essentially the biggest risk is not taking any risk.
Yeah,
you can't always stand still in these things. We're doing that ourselves as a business. We're looking at investing in technology. How can we improve our own resilience? And that's what we're seeing in other businesses. We've had businesses come to us and restructure some of their facilities or take capital, which is growth capital, but it's not growth capital in the way you'd always think it. So they're investing in, better vans or a new system which helps them manage more efficiently. And that gives them resilience, which will allow them to grow at the right point, but it's about weathering those storms.
Yeah, I'm quite excited. You mentioned there a couple of times about, you're a small business and you're relatively new into the MD position here. So what kind of things are you coming up against? What are the challenges?
Yeah, I think, it's how fast can you scale? And this is something founders listening to this podcast will sort of face. How quickly can you go from, if you do 10 widgets, how quickly you can get to 20 and double it? Now, actually, conception on paper, that's really easy, but taking people on that journey is harder. Getting your stakeholders to come on that journey as well. How do you fund it? How do you know you're getting it right? Because I'm a big believer in failing fast as well. So that's one of the challenges. I think there's also the Southwest is a big geography as well, so there's getting to both ends of it.
Yeah, it is. What was that? We always talk about this, but from the very north of the Southwest down to the bottom of Cornwall is kind of the same distance as it then takes to go up to Scotland or something like that.
I once said to sort of one of my colleagues at another CDFI, another social impact land, I said, if you drew the line from the bottom of our patch to the top of it and put it from London, you'd get to Edinburgh, basically. It is a massive patch.
And in terms of being a social enterprise, like how does that help you versus being maybe a for-profit commercial entity?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. And, I think it helps you in certain ways. There are sort of pots of capital which you can get access to sort of support disadvantaged communities. And, we have a lot of those, which is helpful. I think the other side is your staff have a value and a vision and a mission that they can really buy into. And I am passionate about unlocking the potential of the Southwest, the people in the Southwest, the businesses in the Southwest. And I think, providing capital is one part of that. I think podcasts like this are another one, helping founders, giving them the knowledge, but I absolutely think, that being a social impact business allows you to have like the courage of your convictions and really, have a mission that you drive yourself towards.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think, like you say, capital is one part of the puzzle. It's often the piece that people think they need first. Whereas when it turns out after having a conversation with somebody that actually they don't need any capital, they maybe need a partnership or an introduction, or they need to generate their first 10 sales. Like they don't actually need the money up front. I think it's more of a mindset than needing the actual capital. Obviously, there are some businesses where you need it in terms of maybe R&D or tech businesses, but essentially, I think if you have a conversation with a founder, money, if they say that's the first thing they need, often isn't.
No, and that's about having conversations, having good advisors. You know, who are your advisors? Do you have a bit of a board? That's probably overkill for some founders, but you know, those people you can lean on. You know, the business I mentioned that's gone from, you know, startup to exit, we actually declined them at first. We said, "Oh, you come back in 6 months' time, work on X, Y, and Z, and then come back and we think you'll be ready." And they've since said to us, "I was so glad we took those 6 months to do that, because they're in such a stronger position to go from there." They didn't actually need the capital there. They needed to rationalize their supply chain a little bit, you know, spend some time looking internally, getting that foundations right. Probably if you'd given them the capital there, they'd have run so quickly without fixing some of that. Yeah. But not to say the wrong direction, but you know, they're running and their shoelaces untied.
Yeah. I love that analogy. And I think a lot of founders think the money's just going to solve all the problems, don't they? Like throw the cash
That's
in.
the easy bit, getting the cash.
Yeah, exactly. You've got to get those other things
and
right.
I think there's a misdemeanor as well, that people think there's a lack of capital out there. But actually, if you are looking for funding, it's just about looking in the right place, I find.
Yeah, I agree. So we're part of the Southwest Investment Fund, which is a British business bank fund, and that covers equity and debt. So we look after the small loan side. Our partners in the other region look after the rest of it. So there is government capital out there that can support that. And, you know, I really think that capital should be being used to crowd in private sector investment as well. So that there is capital out there. I think for me, one of the big things, and it's one of the things I really want us to work on as an organization, is meeting our customer where they are, meeting those businesses where they are. And that's an awareness piece.
Yeah. And I do think that this is something I'm seeing across the whole of the sector, which is there's still not, everything's not quite tied up. And I do wonder if, again, this is almost an output of COVID and those lockdowns and everyone sort of separating, and now it's time to bring the ecosystem back together again, and everyone needs that. And it's a mixture of maybe things like this where we're talking about stuff, although obviously we're not necessarily specifically focused on this region, but we are focused on founders and giving them information that can be helpful to them. But I definitely find in the day job that getting more people together around an idea, the more times that you can kind of connect various different parts of the ecosystem, the better.
I entirely agree. I was at the CBI Southwest Regional Council yesterday, and one of the FE colleges was talking about how the colleges now have a board, I guess, where they meet regularly and share ideas and what's working in their reach. And I think that's something you're going to see more if we're really going to pursue this growth agenda. Is we're going to need to be better connected. You know, capital is one part of it, advice is one part of it, access to networks. You know, one of the things we did most at DevBank was introduce really strong non-exec directors or advisors who could open those doors. If you want to, I don't know, commercialize into the US or something, give them someone who's done it, been there, knows the challenges and can guide them.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I think as well, it's about knowing your audience and also bringing in other people. So I think that there's something that the community of practice. So it's about bringing together all of those different stakeholders and enabling those conversations, because it can be quite siloed in terms of connecting ecosystems. So I think, we need to do more collectively to be able to bridge those conversations.
Yeah, and I guess this is part of what we're doing here, right?
Yeah, it is. I only want more of that. You know, any opportunity, please shout. You know, we'd love to be part of that. And I think that's what founders and the Southwest needs, is to have that interconnectedness. There is so much potential in this region, and sometimes you're only 1 or 2 degrees away from meeting the right person.
So, and maybe some of this is to then push back to the founders a little bit as well, to say that there are these networks that exist, and try and reach out, try and find them. And I thought it was interesting what you were just saying about that company who's had this amazing journey with you. They came, they found you, and you said no, but and even that is a way of networking. I always talk to the founders about making sure you're building relationships sooner than you need. And I think a lot of them are afraid. A lot of the advice people get is don't talk to a funder until you are absolutely ready. And I do understand that there's a lot of that feeling of, oh, you only get one chance to make the first impression. But I've been kind of redefining what I think ready means in that particular scenario, because I don't think ready has to mean, well, in fact, ready shouldn't mean you need the money today. Ready should actually mean you're ready to have the conversation. You've done the thinking. They can see that you are serious about doing this.
And look, funders hate surprises unless they're really, really good ones. So actually meeting funders or if they're whatever, what the kind of investor is, it doesn't really matter. Meeting them in advance is really important. We're doing things to try and help that. So we're looking to do more stuff with accelerators where we join their program to say, look, this is what funders might be thinking about. Come with some sensible numbers, come with some really clearly written down assumptions, but give me an idiot-proof guide to this. But then we're also linking into the universities as well to try and get into, their courses. If you look at levels of NEETs, people not in education, that's rising and rising. I think entrepreneurship there is going to grow massively. So I think we're really trying to link in there to do that piece. Most people have never raised finance ever. The only reason I understand it is because I've been lucky enough to work in it for the last decade. When I speak to some of my friends who are starting business or thinking about it, I go, they go, oh, you know so much. And I go, if you forget, people don't know this, and it's only because you've been exposed to it. So I would say get out there. If you have a meet the funder opportunity, just go have the chat. Most people don't need a fully formed perfect pitch. They just need the idea of it, and being able to a founder or business being able to take the advice or the input, go away, work on it, and come back. That actually tells you a lot about their capability.
Just to zoom out on the issue you mentioned there, obviously about rising NEETs in the UK. So nearly 1 million now, which is going up to nearly the levels of 2011, and obviously with AI, transforming some businesses and having impacts across all business, regardless of sector. You have to look at the layoffs the other day from Jack Dorsey, firing 40% of his staff, and not because they were in a bad cash position, just because they can and they saw the margins were there and the business case obviously for it. So the point I wanted to make was, if we're seeing these rising levels of young people not going into anything, you mentioned entrepreneurship can be a vehicle for some of those people, not obviously everyone. I think now, in terms of barriers to getting started in entrepreneurship, in terms of what you can do now with AI and developing apps, like traditionally, if you want to develop an app, probably looking at sort of 50k or something, whereas you can potentially vibe code it yourself.
Ask Claude,
and it's only going to get better, right? So I think there is an opportunity there, but I still think a lot of people are missing that mindset piece to become an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of interesting bits you touched on there, and I was talking with a law firm last week who were saying, we've got this opportunity. Junior lawyers, like, you can get Claude or ChatGPT to redline that document. It takes our lawyers half a day, can do it in 30 seconds. But the challenge we have then is when our senior lawyers retire and they're the ones who are reviewing this, where's that next wave of generation? So I do think one of the things businesses need to balance is chasing that short-term, really attractive efficiency savings you can get with AI to how does this impact us a lot further down the line? And then the mindset piece, well, that's, I think, that will come through, in a lot of our education systems being set up to get people into traditional work, whereas I think some of that's going to shift over time. But you see that on TikTok and social media, that, the hustle culture and stuff like that is becoming more and more apparent. And, some of the businesses we see come through startup loans or even just through our business lending, they are like fantastic. I wish I was as brave as them.
Yeah, I've been seeing that a lot as well now. I think to your point about the mindset piece, I guess the challenge, and perhaps this is then a challenge to throw back to education, to the formal education system, is what are we teaching people? What are the mindsets we're giving? Because what I tend to see, generally the youngest I work with are students, and they're students in fairly good universities. So they've already gone down somewhat of a traditional route. But those who jump into entrepreneurship really show that ability to take some risks, they tend to have a background where they've been exposed to that kind of environment one way or another already. And so I think some of it is about saying, how do we push this earlier in the pipeline? And I think that goes for both that entrepreneurial mindset, which of course we just talked, we kicked this whole thing off by talking about uncertainty, right? And how we deal with uncertainty. And I think that entrepreneurial mindset can help you do that, whatever place you end up in. And it can help you deal with life situations as much as it can help you deal with working situations as well. But equally, the AI, the pace of technological change, which is going to continue to change at pace. Hopefully there are guardrails that are going up around some of that as well, that allows for some safety. And we did an event on that yesterday, so we can dig into that a bit more potentially. But I keep thinking, if we continue to be very traditional with how we educate formally, then how do people, when they get to the end of that, first of all, number one, are they going to go to university? That's a whole other conversation. Can they go to university? Is that their pathway? Maybe, maybe not. But how do they allow themselves to, or even understand how to jump into something like entrepreneurship?
I think for me, it's about giving people a sandbox to a degree. You mentioned putting guardrails around it, and I was listening to a podcast on the way over about Claude versus GPT and how that's been used by the US government and the differing approaches there. We're looking at bringing technology into our business, and I think the key thing is, give people permission to fail. Let's put some guardrails around it and say, off you go, guys. See how you get on. There's no wrong answer. There probably is a wrong answer, but there's no wrong answer within reason. What do you learn from it? And that's the mantra I have for my team and my business.
I love that.
If you're going to fail fast and learn from it. And there's nothing wrong. If someone gets everything right every time, you've not taken enough risk. And that's what I'd say to the founders. But then, for universities, colleges, wherever you are, I think it's just embracing the new technology, but, allowing people to play with it in a really a safe way where the consequences are low.
Yeah, absolutely. We were talking yesterday, I was talking to quite a senior academic, but who has also had a business background, and he works in AI. And he was saying they've actually developed a bunch of different kind of traffic lights when it comes to how you might use it in different scenarios. And a kind of green traffic light is, don't worry about it at all. Like, you can play with this. There's not really any risks, any consequences from doing it, all the way up to the red of we don't want to do this. And of course, for founders, the one thing that for me is probably the most important is the kind of IP and freedom of operation side of it. That's the part, certainly with the tech founders I work with, where you're like, you need to be really careful on this, because if you're trying to sort of ring fence any kind of IP, then that can be risky. The other thing, of course, is kind of any ROI of time that you put into building anything, which of course we're saying these are quick tools, but you still have to get yourself up to speed. You still have to learn things. And that's just on the founder side of it. Of course, we know there are other risks in terms of individuals using it. And the big message that seemed to come out of the event we did yesterday was just look for the use cases where you want to use it. So that idea of sandboxing around a use case, like, okay, what do we do in our day-to-day work? Where can we add something in? Let's have a play with how we might do that.
And I love what you said there, Matt, about just having a play, because I think that's the best way of learning. I think it's the only way of learning really, is by making those mistakes for yourself and then realizing. And I think that's a great thing about entrepreneurship, is there's no wrong answer really, because it will take you on a different path or give you that mindset to thrive in life.
And what you're saying there is, and entrepreneurship is based on critical thinking. You want people to have that critical thinking ability, and that's one of my worries about something like AI, is you lose a bit of that critical thinking. So for me, AI is like fantastic at doing like really boring automated reading long documents, summarize this for me, etc., etc. That's where I see it should be being used in the first instance, and you go after those easy use cases first and then work from there. But you'd be amazed, and this is what I'm sort of saying to my team, is if we can find ways of using technology to free up our time on this, and then we reallocate our time to it snowballs. Before you know it, what the snowball like that is, this size, and you've got so much more time to do something with it.
What I love about what you've just said, and it plays into something else I've heard a couple of times, even in the last couple of weeks, which is what you just, and anyone who's not watching, if you're not watching, you can come and find us on YouTube, by the way, and see the video version of this. If you actually kind of showed with your hands this idea of there's this space over here where we want to be playing, where we want to be spending our human time. So let's let the technology do something in these other spaces, and think about what are those things where we want to do the human bits, whether that's human connection, whether that's creativity, whatever that might be. And I think the flip of that is, what shouldn't we leave behind? So I'm working with somebody who, that wasn't me that came up with that, somebody else said it, and then yesterday, what shouldn't we leave behind? And yesterday it was about what things do we still want to be doing, and so I think that that's also really important. And one of the examples was that if you're in a meeting or whatever, and you can have a meeting note taker, and that's great actually, and there's many scenarios where that's really, really good. But also, as humans, we do a lot of processing by thinking and writing at the same time.
We've all got iPads.
So I know. Although usually I do have a notebook, but so that idea of not losing the writing, you've got your pencil there as well.
I know.
So that process is actually a really important one for us, and it helps us to embed our thoughts. Well, guess what? You can kind of do both, right? You don't need to rely on the writing for your actual notes, the outputs, the remembering of what was said. But you can still have a notebook and you can write things down.
It's really interesting. We're working with a technology consultant at the moment in our business, and he keeps saying, I'm going through the playback on that. And I just stopped him. You've said a few times you're going through the playback. What do you mean? He said, I'm just listening back to the conversation and revisiting the notes. I thought, God, that's such an interesting idea. Like, usually you take your notes, whereas now, you could have you clearly get the approval of the people. You can have that recording of that conversation, and then you could go, great, I can play that back, or what do we mean by this bit, and really sort of refine yourself. So that's it. And you mentioned, on your point there, Becky, around what do you not want to lose? I don't mean you want to lose the human judgment in all this, and that's something as a CDFI and a social impact lender, we are relationship led. I don't want to lose that element of it. I think people can look in the white of someone's eye and make that judgment call better than any piece of technology can, and that's what you don't want to lose. And you don't want to lose your value. You mentioned about being a social enterprise. You don't want technology to make you lose that. What you want to do is technology to help you do more of that.
Because obviously you make all of your lending decisions. It's never a case of computer says no.
Never. So we make all our lending decisions. So how can we use technology to speed up that process? That's really, and put the value in better places. And, you mentioned about this is where we are. I'm using my hands again for those of you just listening, not looking. This is where we are, this is where we want to be. If you can speed up some of those decisions, you can actually, that becomes iterative. You can look at riskier propositions, or propositions which are a bit more challenging, and really start trying to find the gray. And, as a CDFI, we have a mantra of let's try and find ways to say yes, not to say no. And you can start doing more and more of that.
That's very interesting. Thinking about kind of principles and how you work with the technology. One of the interesting things I was hearing about Claude versus ChatGPT was that Claude never gets, so they have a certain set of principles, and things that don't fit into that are never, it's not given, it's not fed into the data, it's not, so it's very ring fenced, versus ChatGPT, where it gets basically taught how to do things and then told you shouldn't do this. And yet it will still do things that it shouldn't do. And one of the things that I guess worries me with some of this is, and not to get super political right now, but one of the things that has happened with kind of political stances and different sides is that, let's just talk wokeness. There's a whole list of things now that are defined as being woke, and Anthropic has now been put into that category because they actually have shown a little bit of
I think
care
Trump
over.
called them liberals on his Truth Social post. But
Yeah, so and I guess something that maybe concerns me a little bit with the intersection of where politics is now, where technology is now, and where that could potentially go, is putting these things where humans, the course of humans' life, this again, I'm crediting this to somebody else, not to me, but the course of somebody's life should not be able to be changed by the technology without having due consideration by a human. And whether you get funding or not is a good example of that, right? And you're not going to hand over those decisions to that to the computer, so to speak. And yet, once it gets politicized, there's this idea of, oh, well, if you sit on this side of the political spectrum, then you let technology make decisions for you. And you do it with a very capitalist lens there as well. And if you sit on this side, then there's more safety, more guardrails put around things. And it's, that to me is where some of the dangers potentially come in here as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. I haven't thought about it that way. Podcast I was listening to the other day did talk about sort of the reason why GPT and Anthropic have fallen out or in favor of the government, and because some of them have put those guardrails around it. I mean, that's for a decision as a business, really, isn't it? We are a social values business. We, and the way we expect our staff to behave, you're going to take that mantra to anything you do. Doesn't matter whether it's technology doing it, a person doing it, it's some of our marketing material. Like, there is a way we behave, and that's what's expected of a business.
And actually, Anthropic made that decision, and then they went to number one on the Apple charts, and
they lost the contract.
And maybe it's about you're attracting the right people.
I was driving in and I was thinking, they say, they're going to lose £200 million of government contracts. I thought, this is like the best marketing they've probably had in their entire life. So
we were talking about their ad. There's been a lot of the Anthropic versus ChatGPT has been it's been in the news the last month or so now.
But the point is, your vibe attracts your tribe.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess it just you keep going back to as founders, standing by your principles, standing by like what is the business you want to build. I always think with the founders that I work with, one of the main reasons people are doing this is because they want to build something based on what they care about, on their values. And so, because otherwise, why wouldn't you go and take a salary from somebody else? It's so. Yeah. I mean, there's probably many reasons why you wouldn't, but this is one of the main reasons you do it. And so if you're then going to be like, well, actually, I'm going to sacrifice my principles for a contract, for whatever it is, maybe it's time to reevaluate whether or not this is the right pathway for you.
It's really interesting, Becky. I'm incredibly driven by my values and leaving society in a better place and using my skill set for that. And I mean, this is going to sound trite and maybe a bit ridiculous, but I read a book called I'm going to have Legacy now, which is basically about the All Blacks and what you can learn about from the All Blacks in business. And a chapter that really struck me, it's called like Leave the Jersey in a Better Place. And the whole idea is, you will only play for the All Blacks, if you're lucky, for 10 years. But at the end of that, you want to have left it in a better place. And that's very much, how I feel about what the work I do. If I come into something, I want to give it my absolute all with my value set and leave it in a better place for a better legacy for someone else. And that's what we see so many founders doing. We've funded a sustainability business based in Bristol who, they've taken, again, another one took a startup loan. They've now taken a follow-on round, and, that's a fantastic business that we can support. And they are, my work of being a finance bro can help enable them to actually, do something really good for the planet.
Yeah. I like that you've brought that up, because I feel like there is a bit of a question sometimes over if you work in entrepreneurship, you work with founders, that's all about money, it's all about holding up these capitalist systems, and can you care for things, can you care for people? And I think probably all of us in this room, we're all kind of nodding because we're like, yes, this is our vehicles to make an impact.
I think most founders never do it for the money. If they do it for the money, they just get a well-paid job essentially. And then if you dig in, if they say money is their first answer, it's often, well, I want some freedom, or I don't want to be told what to do. And it's like, if you keep peeling back those layers, money's never there. And I think your principles obviously never change. They're kind of set. Your outlook is obviously can be shaped, and like how you think changes throughout the course of your life and your business life cycle. But your principles, the things that you care about, are going to remain true to you.
Yeah.
You shouldn't bend them.
Do you think we were talking beforehand, we've all grown up in this part of the world. We're from the southwest of England. Do we think that our viewpoint on that and the kind of founders that we work with more often are that is a version of some founders? Is it true for a wider range of founders?
It's a really interesting question. That I suspect if you spoke to employees across any organization, you'd have a mixture of people who are there because they just need a job, and actually what they really want to do is come in, do their job, go home, see their family, and that's great. Some people are there probably because they want to rise up the career ladder. Some people are there because they just have to be. You probably have the same with founders. Some founders probably, do want to be Mark Zuckerberg, and that's fine. They want to make billions and billions of pounds.
Does anyone actually want to be Mark Zuckerberg?
Well, maybe that was a bad example, but I think that
he's cool. He looks cool now.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, it's amazing what $1 billion in a branding workshop can do.
Incidentally, I am going to go see Sarah Wynne Williams, who wrote Careless People, the expose on Facebook. I'm going to go. She's coming to Bath, and I'm going to go and see her talk. So read her book if we want to know how cool or not Mark Zuckerberg is. Anyway, sorry, we interrupted.
No. I think the main point there is, don't they, you have a variety of founders, but I do think the lots of businesses we see, and particularly a lot of the backgrounds and the demographics of people we're seeing is, they are coming from a wide variety of backgrounds. We have lots of female-led businesses starting, from very deprived areas of the Southwest. We've all grown up in the Southwest, and a lot of people might think the Southwest is incredibly prosperous, but actually bits of it are incredibly prosperous. Bits of it are very, very poor. We spoke up where I grew up in Frome, parts of Frome are very poor, parts are very wealthy. I think it's changed over the last decade. So I think, you have a variety, but the thing that I really take positivity from is, you do see, I hope the businesses that succeed are the ones that want to do good for the planet and do well. And I think, you mentioned wokeism. I think maybe there's a blip at the moment. I think ultimately, like, most people want to leave the world in a better place.
Yeah, and just on the flip side of things as well, I've met lots of social entrepreneurs as well, and there's a bit of a taboo in their own mindset where they've got a bad view of money, but to have more impact and help more people, they need to run it as a profitable business to create more impact, to do the good bit. So it's like the classic thing, it's cliche, but when in a plane situation where there's a crash, you obviously put on your own oxygen mask first, because you've got to help yourself before you can help other people.
But I mean, Ollie, that's a fantastic point. We are a not-for-profit, but we shouldn't be afraid of making profit, because the profit's what gives you the resilience to weather storms, to invest in technology, to hire new people. So there's nothing wrong with making money. It's how you then use that money, and we reinvest our profits. We don't pay dividends to anyone. We reinvest our profits in how can we do more of what we do. So profit is not a dirty word. You know.
Yeah, you're definitely getting kicked out of some of the tech bro.
That's
Sorry,
fine.
the finance bro. Well, probably am tech bro. Is there? Yeah. I think this is a really interesting conversation. And as I'm sitting here thinking, because I also have worked with that whole range of different people, and I feel like having working on a few accelerators that are international accelerators at the moment, which is fascinating. And actually, when I was doing my startup, I did a couple of international accelerators, and I do think there is a cultural difference. I do think kind of what you're exposed to, where you grow up, is going to impact how you look at things, although there's always a range of people. But coming back to that point of people do want to feel like that they've done some good. They do want to feel like they're leaving the world in a better place. And not everyone agrees on exactly what that means. And that's probably where some of those differences come in the most. And I really like the idea of, we talked earlier about the the systems that kind of support entrepreneurship and these different pieces of the puzzle, and you've got the funding, and we've got the ecosystems, and we've got the communication. And actually, I think it is part of our jobs, or certainly, again, with our principles, with our backgrounds, with the values that we have, to hold up those people who are also living to those values of wanting to make positive impact with what they do, wanting to make positive change. And it's quite nice to just sit down and recognize that a little bit, and almost re-permission. Well, maybe for me, maybe you two didn't need it, but that permission of being like, yeah, you can stand up for what you believe this is about.
Yeah, and I think that's why entrepreneurship is so great, because like you said, you get people from all walks of life, deprived areas, people who are very affluent and have got lots of investment straight away from bank of mum or dad. But the point is that diversity creates a better world. And I think if you're having more people going into entrepreneurship, regardless of background, regardless of political viewpoint, it's going to create a better world ultimately.
Yeah. That's why we're here. That's why we do what we do. I feel like there's a million more things we could talk about. However, we don't have all that much time left now. So is there anything else you wanted to share with us? I mean, we love the feel-good stories. So I don't know if you've got anything else. Or...
You love the feel-good stories?
Yeah.
I mean, I think one trend we've seen from CDFIs is sort of refinancing. So businesses coming to us and looking to refinance their facilities. And that, in some ways, you could see as a real negative. But we supported a business recently that has quite a social impact background. They do some stuff in social housing, which is a personal interest of mine. I'm a chair of a housing association as well. Our refinancing saved them £140,000 in cash a year, which has now allowed them to, I'm trying to remember the figure, roughly employ 5 people and reinvest that money back in there. So that's a great example of how, just having a supportive lender and actually exploring all your options that are available to you rather than just necessarily the easiest can really make a great impact in, to society, the economy, your business and people's lives.
It's kind of win for everyone, because then you've got that business that is growing and thriving, and then that's going to come back and support you to then support more people. You were mentioning before we started this about also a lot of the businesses do, they need money, they get sucked into maybe higher interest financing.
I mean, it's something we're seeing more and more of. High cost short-term facilities absolutely have a place in the market. They're really useful for bridging a contract or stuff. But if businesses or founders are looking to grow their business on the basis of 12-month facilities at very high interest, that's going to become quite challenging for you quickly. And there's 2 ways you could see that challenge. You could throw it to the high cost lenders and go da. Or you could throw it back to the CDFIs and the other lenders and go, well, you need to meet your customer where they are. So how do you speed up your processing time so that you're, comparatively competitive there? How do you raise greater awareness of your product, what you're offering to the market and your service? And that's really something I'm taking on with my team, is how, and the wider CDFI sector and responsible finance, who are our body, how do we really go out there and address, that by saying, look, these are all your options? And it's an education piece, which is the whole point of this podcast, is there are lots of options out there, and it's worth you exploring, at least to some degree, all of them.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering how much of that the business owner's mindset that unlocked, because sometimes you can go down a rabbit hole of, things aren't working out in your favor. We talked about the uncertainty at the moment, things like employer national insurance contributions going up, national living wage going up, lots of margins being squeezed. And for overnight, a decision to have that amount of impact on the monthly cash balance is incredible.
That business has taken the time because it's become an issue for them. They've got loans stacked up. They had to do it. I think if you flip back to the point when they made the decision to take those facilities, the problem was a different one. Was I just need cash tomorrow. Oh, this option takes 24, 72 hours. This option takes 2 to 3 weeks. I'll go with that one. And I think, people generally look for the path of least resistance in almost everything they do. We as Swig need to work out, how do we get there? How do we speed up the way we can do things, make our information requirements less cumbersome, and really meet founders where they are and focus on the key bits of any proposition that matter, so that we are, that option of choice when someone's looking in the first place. Because, if that business had those facilities for 1 year, that's £140,000. You know, it's not all of that's actual cash. I think it was about 80 grand of interest a year, which could have been reinvested into, you know, into their business anyway.
Yeah.
I'm going to put you on the spot here, Matt.
No.
I haven't teed you up for this,
Yeah.
but is there a person that you think we should have on this podcast in terms of a founder or an operator or an investor, somebody that comes to mind? I know obviously we got introduced by Carmen Peacock, who kindly put us together. You can tell me offline.
I think you should definitely have Carmen Peacock on here. I think Carmen is absolutely fantastic and got great insight. Got your recommend? Give me a second. I mean, there's so many businesses I've seen over the years and founders. I think we're really lucky on Swig's board. We have a guy called Dave McCarthy, and apologies if you're watching, Dave. I haven't pre-warned you that I was going to ask this, but Ollie didn't warn me. He was actually one of the founding members of Atom Bank, you know, who were the Monzo before Monzo. I think we talk about, you know, I'm a relatively new MD. I lean on all my Neds really quite a lot for how much, you know, ideas and the wider sector. People like that, I think, you know, I get someone like, you know, someone who's been there, done it, and they've done that big exit down there, but also is willing to really, you know, talk about the nitty gritty. It's not all exciting stuff. Sometimes you are actually, who is your paper supplier? Like, you actually do have to care about that sometimes.
Amazing. Thank you for that, Matt. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about?
No, I think that's hopefully the audio's worked and people can see and hear us. That's the main thing.
Let us know in the comments if you've actually watched this and you've been able to see and hear us. So we will be back again. We're going live in 2 weeks' time. And so do start putting it in your diary, especially if you heard us all the way through, because
and we will be advertising and marketing it in the future.
Yeah,
we obviously wanted to road test it for today.
Check the audio works. So
exactly.
Hopefully it has.
And where can people find you?
Yeah, so search Swig Finance on Google. We'll come up there, or find us on LinkedIn or anywhere else. We're always happy to help. We have offices in Bristol, Exeter, Poole, and Truro as well. So come find us. We're always happy to chat. And swigfinance.co.uk.
Amazing.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Guys. Thank you very much for having me.
Good chat.